You want to solo dungeons, world bosses, and even veteran content? Well, this is the build for you. The Magic Dragonknight, an absolute monster, melting enemies with fire sustaining damage, taking it on in massive AoE. Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com with an Elder Scrolls Online video. The ESO yearly season's heating up, and I haven't jumped on and played in a while, so I'm going to do a Dragonknight, walk you through the skills, the gear, the champion points, consumables, everything you need to know. And I'll give you a ton of flexible options if you don't have the gear, so stay tuned. Timestamps are below. Hit that thumbs up if you like me doing ESO build videos, and I'll keep cranking them out. Let's go. First thing up, we are going to talk about gear because everyone wants to talk about it. So this is going to be a solo PvE build. Now, when we talk about solo PvE, some critical things to go over is spell penetration and physical penetration. Usually in veteran content, it's right around 18,200. So when we're buffed, we're going to look for that number as the benchmark to get to. I have a bunch of big stats, including a big stamina pool, very specific reason with the Dragonknight. The main reason you want to have a healthy stamina pool is Molten Whip costs both. So you're going to need to be able to balance both resource pools to sustain. One way to do that is to generate a lot of ultimate so you can use Battle Roar more frequently. Using ultimate, it's going to give you a flood of resources, including magic and stamina. Since this is a solo build, we're going to have to blend survivability, sustain, and damage all in one build. Another thing you need to factor into making a build for solo is your light and medium armor passive, specifically how many pieces of each you're using and why. The main thing here is this concentration, increasing your physical and spell penetration by 939 for each piece of light armor worn. This is relevant and why most people in PvE use a lot of medium armor, because you can over penetrate and go over that 18,200 cap and it's just dead stats. For solo, that is not so much the case. In medium armor, you're going to have access to weapon and spell damage, a bunch of other things like stamina recovery and critical damage and critical healing. So for solo, you can use 5 or 6 light armor and not over penetrate, but for group, you're going to want a little bit more medium. That's why a lot of the hybrids play that way. So we are going to play traditional light armor Dragonknight fire breathing monster for this specific reason. Now, when we go to the gear selections, this is my old kind of favorite build that I used to run Vatashram and VMA all the time. We're going to start with the front bar setup. So we're going to run daggers mainly due to the passive Nirnhone and the charge trait. One of them is going to be poison damage to trigger the passive that gives you stamina sustain. The other one is going to be deal physical damage and restore stamina, so you're going to have a lot of stamina recovery with the charge trait in your offhand. Order's Wrath is a simple craftable set that you can get. If you don't have access to it and you can't craft it in the individual zone, you can buy it from the traders and it's readily available. So not technically base game, but very easy to get a hold of. Crafting location is right around here in the high isles. Now this is your main damage set, craftable, very easy to get a hold of. We're going to go divines on the body. If you don't have access to that or you want some alternatives, let me give them to you. A classic is good old burning spell weave. So dealing flame damage, it's going to cause you to get a flood of increased weapon and spell damage, but it doesn't have a cooldown. It's not 100% uptime. A base game set that is extremely good is good old Mother's Sorrow. This just gives you a lot of critical chance. You can find it in an Ebonheart Pack Deshawn area. You can also buy it from traders. Very simple and easy to get a hold of. Now there's some huge damage sets, and these are mainly for trials players, so not always applicable to solo players. So let me show you what they are. A lot of folks are going to recommend Anzul's Torment. This comes from Sanity's Edge Trial, and the 5-piece is going to increase your damage done against monsters by 7%. So just a flat boost to increase damage. Another option is a good proc set, Depths, and that's going to create a proc, do a bunch of frost damage and AoE, doesn't have 100% uptime, so that's pretty good to put on your front bar. Another one from Shrivner's Hall, which is a dungeon set, is Rune Carver's Blaze. You may want this on your body at all times, but it's going to increase your damage, your flame damage every 3rd tick. So if you run a lot of dots, this is pretty good for Dragonknights. But for this video footage, I was running Order's Wrath because it's simple, it's applicable to a lot of solo players, and it's good, trust me. Now, the other set that I run is Perfected False Gods. Yes, this is a trial set. Deltia, why are you running a trial set in solo PV? I know that's stupid, but stick with it. So it comes from Sunspire, and it basically just gives you a ton of resource sustain and major expedition. This is fantastic when you're cruising through the solo arenas. It's also going to reduce the magic cost of your abilities by 8%, so it's just incredible magic resource sustain. but there's actually an equivalent set you can get called Withered Hand. This is an Alakir Desert. Not exactly as good, but it is base game Overland. When you kill an enemy within 28 meters, you're gonna get a flood of health and magic. It does have a cooldown of 3 seconds, and it doesn't have the major expedition. But believe it or not, I use this all the time as a starter set if you don't have access to False Gods. So I like a resource sustaining set. If you don't want resource sustaining, you can always ramp up the damage big time by using depths on your body. Or like I said earlier, Burning Spellweave, another light armor set like Mother's Sorrow, and just do Order's Wrath, Mother's Sorrow, and be good to go. But the resource sustain, the speed is well worth it if you can get it. Now we're gonna run a Mythic. So the ultimate Mythic for solo play and just God tier survivability is Ring of the Pale Order. Deal damage, it's gonna give you a lot of healing. Something to know about Ring of Pale Order is a champion point here that I like to have. It's called Reaving Blow. When you deal direct damage, you heal for 7% of the damage done. These two things stack, so you can have just absolutely mind-numbing, insane survivability by using both of them. If you have enough survivability, you want more damage, don't use this and don't use that champion point. The one you're going to want to use if you have a lot of survivability is Veloth. So it's going to increase your damage done to monsters, and it's going to gain minor force at all times. That essentially frees up a bar slot and just increases your damage done massively, as well as offensive penetration. So use this if you're a sweat lord and you don't need a lot of survivability. And then we have Oakensoul, which is another Mythic. If you want to run one bar only and use a lightning staff to fully charge heavy attacks, this is your Mythic. If you don't have a Mythic and don't want to run it, what you do is you swap out to a Monster Helm setup. So a 1-piece or a 2-piece Valken Scoria is very good for a Monster Helm. 1-piece gives you pin if you're not above that 18,000, and a 2-piece is going to shoot down these meteors that do damage single target and AoE, scaling off your weapon or spell damage. For a 1-piece, you're going to go with a Slime Craw to get increased critical chance. Use this or Valken Scoria. If you're at that 18,000 or above, you want to use Slime Crawl. If you're below and need a little bit more offensive penetration, use Valken Scoria. One for probably higher damage when you're talking about doing a Trials dummy or just burning down a target is Zons. This comes from Scalecaller Peak. And if you're looking for survivability, you just struggle with some of those solo arenas, you don't have access to Pale Order, look at getting Ice Heart. It's going to give you a damage shield, which is really nice, and you can boost up your shield strength with a champion point. What I'm running right now is Order's Wrath, False Gods. If you wanted, you could easily swap to 2 trial set, keeping 5 light armor on at all times, and having a lot more damage, but you would lower your survivability. Veloth, you have good survivability, swap that out from Pale Order to get even more damage. The back bar, we're going to run good old Maelstrom Perfected Inferno Staff with increased weapon and spell damage and infused trait. That's going to put us at 25,000 HP, 30k magic, and 18k stamina. Really good to have a high amount of stamina. Now, if I put my crit buff on, then I get 50% spell critical. So I'm right at that, a little bit low critical, but we'll have good penetration. Okay, so we come to this little dummy tester thing, and you can see our penetration average and max is 18,806. So we're slightly over, but not a huge amount. This is kind of where we really want to be to increase our damage solo. Next up, let's talk about the skills. We're using dual wield. Why dual wield? Mainly because of all these juicy passives that do a lot of damage. You do not have to use dual wield. However, some of the really good skills is Quick Cloak. I like this morph, which gives you major evasion, lowers your AoE damage, does damage in an AoE around you, but also major expedition for 4 seconds. This is very useful if you have False Gods or even if you don't, but it's going to cost a lot of stamina. This morph is going to last a lot longer, so it's easier to maintain. As a Dragonknight, you're going to have 1,000 buffs. Also, you can cast this before you jump into combat, and it's very, very helpful. Next up, we're going to have Flames of Oblivion. While slotted on either bar, you gain major prophecy and savagery, so increasing your spell and weapon critical rating, and does a lot of good damage. Plus, you can cast it over and over and over to trigger the 3 stacks of the whip. The 3 stacks of the whip is what you're going for to fire it off as a huge damage source single target. So this is a tool you can use pre-combat. So for instance, if I get into combat, you're going to see the stack on the bottom of the screen. 1, 2, 3, right in the center or the left right now. That's when you want to use the whip ideally for the most damage, which I hit like a noodle because I'm not buff. Don't judge me. Next up is Noxious Breath. This is going to deal poison damage over time, AoE conal in front of you in Major Breach. This is where you're going to get your physical and spell resistance. This is your primary dot on bosses or mobs that are going to last a bit of time because it's going to increase your damage overall due to Major Breach. Next up is Molten Whip. This is your main single target spammable. Ideally, you're going to use this when you have 3 stacks and pre-buff before you jump into combat and use that 3 stacks for a big, huge whip. Okay, next up is an AoE skill I like to use is Draw Essence. So this is flame damage. It's going to heal you for the damage done. So you have something on your bar you can hit as an oh crap panic. You really don't want to use this in single target. 3 or more enemies is really what you want to use this for. It's going to heal you and do really good damage and refund some magic. You can kind of maintain this in AoE situations. The alternative here is Burning Talons. Burning Talons is a lot more damage. It's AoE as well, has a nice juicy synergy with it. However, it doesn't have the resource sustain or the healing component with it. So if you're really good on survivability and you don't need the healing, Burning Talons you want to put in this specific situation right here. Next up is our ultimate. Really, we're slotting Flawless Dawnbreaker here just for the passives by killing stuff and getting increased weapon and spell damage. Increased weapon and spell damage 3%, so that's nice, just putting in our bar, and you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy. So this is going to generate a lot of ultimate. This is going to feed into our resource sustaining loop with battle roll. That's why we put it there. An alternative is Corrosive Armor. If you're not going to have a bunch of penetration and you want to rely on Corrosive Armor as your ultimate, it gives you 100% physical and spell pen, then you swap that out. Back bar, we talked about it before, we're going to use a Flame Staff. This is where you get a lot of flex spots. So igneous weapons, you need a Earth and Heart ability to cast frequently. 1, because of Mountain's Blessing. Minor Brutality 20 seconds, increasing your weapon damage by 10%. Notice it says weapon damage. It doesn't say spell or weapon damage. That's very important. So you want to cast this or another Earth and Heart ability frequently to build ultimate and also maintain that 20-second buff. Next up, if you're not running Belof's which gives you minor force, you're going to need a source of minor force. So the pain in the butt one to get is Channeled Acceleration, which comes from Psijic Order. You can run this, and the reason I like it solo is you can pre-buff. Before you jump into combat, you can fire this up, give you some speed, and it lasts for a very long time, 1 minute. So you're not having to babysit it. However, it doesn't have any damage, and it does have a cast time. The alternative, which is a really good choice, is good old Barb Trap. This is one of the best dots in the game, but it is melee duration, it is stamina, and it takes 1.5 seconds to arm. This is really good in Maelstrom Arena or something where a boss is spawning. So if you have the extra speed and you want an extra dot to maintain and babysit, put it right here. Now the third spot is a really big flex spot. So let's start off with the most damage possible. We're going to do Eruption. So this is going to drain your magic. So if you have False Gods, not that big of an issue, but it just does crazy damage and you can refresh the dot. Now, if you don't have much of survivability, you can do Volatile Armor. This is going to give you your major resolve, physical and spell resistance. It also shoots spikes around you, so it has a good AoE damage component in it. And if you're running something like VMA or Vatashram or something solo, I run Unrelenting Grip, so I just chains things in and smash them with an AoE and that 3 key right here. Another alternative for survivability, if you're running 5 light armor, it's called Harness Magic. This will have a good damage shield. Or if you don't want that, you can have a burst heal in its place, which is Coagulating Blood. So a lot of different options. Eruption, best damage. Or another damage source, but really incredible healing, is Burning Embers. This is an Ardent Flame ability, and you're going to swipe a target, single target, very long, 24-second, and it's going to heal absolutely insane. Plus, it automatically triggers the burning status effect, which is very helpful for the Dragonknight. When you apply burning or poison, you restore magic and stamina. It can occur once every 3 seconds. So burning status effect and poison, which we put on our enchants on our weapons, is why we're running that all to resource sustain. And then last ability up is Unstable Wall of Elements. There's 2 really helpful morphs. Unstable is going to blow up. It's going to have a shorter duration. Blockade is going to last a bit longer, so if you don't want to babysit it or you don't want as much AoE, swap the morphs, but that's going to correlate to our Maelstrom Arena staff. Some people run a Greatsword in the back bar, some people run a bow. We don't want to hybridize too much. We want to make this feel like a magic Dragonknight. Flame, magic, fire, let's go. Standard of Might, the obvious choice on your back bar for your ultimate. Okay, so if I were using this specific loadout, what I would do is buff left to right, longest to shortest. So typically I start out with the longest thing, 70 seconds. This one here, I go to the front, quick cloak, and now I'm ready to go. So I would charge up a long, big old heavy attack, drop my eruption, which my 3 keys not working on my old school keyboard, burning embers, swap, and my 3 key is definitely not working. Now I have 2 stack whip, I'm gonna hit it. Now all my dots are running. Flames of Oblivion's down. I'm gonna swap back to my back bar, and now I'm just managing buffs. When I don't have any buff to use or debuff, I'm just gonna whip. Eruption's out, bar swap back to it, place eruption down, and quick cloak's the next one. So my eyes are scanning the bottom, and burning embers is down, swap to it, flames of Oblivion's down, and breath, potions up, and I'm just looking at my bar. Okay, what's coming up next? Next is eruption. I'm gonna need to bar swap of 1000 now. 3, and then do a couple more whips. Next thing, unstable, flames. That's kind of how you manage it. Your priorities are always to survive. So burning embers for heal over time is really important. And then your noxious breath to reduce their armor. And then unstable, flames of oblivion, quick cloak. So in terms of your dots, remember, burning embers is going to do a lot of damage. It's going to give you a lot of healing passively. So make sure you're maintaining that. And then just scan and rotate your eyes on what is the biggest priority at the time. Sometimes it's hard to maintain all the dots, so just do your best. And then when there's a bunch of AoE, that's when you hit deep breath. Now real quick, if you want to use the 1 bar build, what I would recommend using is the lightning staff, so you can fully charge a heavy attack and rip it off. Your abilities would be unstable wall, coagulating blood for a burst heal, burning talons for an AoE damage over time, noxious breath to reduce armor, and then eruption. Those would be the 5 skills along with standard of might. I would run Oakensoul, Sergeant's Mail, and then another set that what you wanted on your body. If you have the scribing system, you can do Ulfric's Contingency. I probably screwed that name up. It's the Mages Guild one. You want flame damage for your focus script, lingering torment for your signature script, and vulnerability for your affix script. Now let's jump into champion points. Okay, in the green tree, Steed's Blessing, Gifted Rider, War Mount, and Master Gatherer. These are not that important. The blue tree is important. So I have Grieving Blows. This is optional. Take this out if you don't need survivability. Wraithful Strikes, weapon and spell damage. Fighting Finesse, critical damage and critical healing. And then Master at Arms, dealing direct damage, increases. You can go with Thaumaturge for damage over time, or Deadly Aim depending on what skills you're using most. So swap out Reaving Blows for Thaumaturge if you want more damage. Pro tip, come down here and take this specific one right here. Reduces damage by non-player attacks by 5% per stage. So with 20 points, this is a passive, don't have to slot it. It's going to reduce NPC damage by 10%, massive. Moving over to the red, we got Balanced Vitality, Fortify, and Rejuvenation, along with Siphoning spells. If you're going to be using the Ice Heart Monster Helm and you want to do a lot of shields, you would use Bastion instead of one of the other slottables. When it comes to race, there are a few options. The best in the game right now is Dark Elf, and that's what I am. I would recommend Khajiit as well, also very, very good. Breton for resource sustain, High Elf's a good alternative as well. Those are the best. For Mundus Stone, this is a good choice here, is the Lover for physical spell penetration and physical pen, but you may go over the cap. Another thing to note is that pen does not influence your healing. So the Thief is going to give you critical damage. It's also going to be relevant if you're doing a lot of group content and someone's providing these buffs and debuffs for you and you're spilling over that 18,000 cap. So if you're truly playing solo, go with the Lover. If you want something that's going to influence both your healing and damage, go with the Thief. Or if you're playing in group frequently, use the Thief. Okay, when it comes to consumables, I like Bewitched Sugar Skulls. It's kind of a PvP type thing for food, but it gives you a lot of resources. So if you run out of resources, you're pretty much dead, right? This is why I like it. Clockwork Citrus is going to give you a lot of resource sustain, max health, health recovery. This is good if you're not running False Gods and you want something that works. Also, blue food like this, max health and max magic is technically the best if you have good resource sustain. So if you're over sustaining and really not even needing to use potions, use this. This is something for like a parse dummy. So it's going to have no health with it, but it has max magic and max recovery. So use that instead. Now for potions, we have our spell damage and we have our weapon damage buff. So we don't have to necessarily use spell damage potions. You can use tri potions for healing and sustain. If you're a sweat lord and have the resources, these right here are heroism potions. So they're going to give you magic recovery, stamina recovery, and minor heroism. The ultimate gen is going to basically feed into your resource sustain and make you extremely powerful. You're also going to have that passive in the alchemy tree that increases the duration. This is very important, so you can get 100% uptime on your potions, called medicinal use. Now, to make these things, I think I'm right here. You need to use Columbine and then 2 dragon ones. It looks like I used them already, but it's the most OP potion you can possibly use. And if you're doing something super sweaty, spend the extra gold. Otherwise, use tri-potions. So gameplay-wise, what you want to get a practice on doing is always pre-buff. Before you jump into combat, your #1 strategy is to go longest to shortest to buff duration. So you get in this rotation of using 4 abilities right before you start. Then once you do your initial pull, you want to debuff with Noxious Breath to remove that armor, put Eruption down for some AoE damage, Unstable, and then Burning Embers. Then you get into priority mode. What is my priority? #1 is to survive. So if you run into trouble, boom, hit that deep breath in an AoE situation. If you need more healing coming in, swipe for a Burning Embers. If you need a flood of healing, just use a tri-potion. It's better than dying. And then remember that you can use an ultimate to get back health as well. If that doesn't work, then put a shield or put a burst heal like Coagulating Blood on your bar. Once that's done, then your goal is to maintain as many dots as possible. If you're over sustaining and you have a lot of survivability, drop Deep Breath for a Burning Talent. If you don't do enough damage, drop Channeled Acceleration for Barb Trap. So a lot of these solo builds or PvE builds, put the training wheels on. You want heavy survivability with Pale Warder. You want a lot of resource sustain with False Gods. But once you get to a certain level with these builds, start stripping off the training wheels and putting on more damage. It's okay if you die in one of these solo arenas. It's better to die and progress and get better at the game and have quicker reactions, anticipate the damage, put damage shields up, than just kind of being stuck where you are. So don't be afraid to experiment if you're not doing as much damage or you have too much resource sustain or too much survivability. Use those alternatives I suggested. And for the love of the maker, hit that thumbs up if you got something out of this video, subscribe for more, leave me a comment. Thanks for watching.